The 80-20 rule is a formula and a rule that I've heard of for my entire career. But I hate to break it to you, it doesn't always work. And the thing about the 80-20 rule is, yes, we've heard about it in college, in courses, and trainers. It's a wonderful rule. It works most of the time for most industries. The key is most of the time in most industries. So the million-dollar question for those of you watching this is, does it work for the staffing business and for the recruiting business? And the answer might surprise you, which is why it's one of my big myths. Really, most of the time, the 80-20 rule doesn't apply to our industry. Well, why? Think about it. First of all, the big fallacy in the 80-20 rule, and for those of you who need a refresher, the 80-20 rule says that 80% of your business will come from 20% of your clients. Therefore, the training wisdom and the way you probably operate is to focus on those 20% and don't focus on the rest of the craziness in the world, and really cultivate the relationship with that group, because that's where the business is going to come. So focus 80% of your time in that group. Again, when you come up with the 80-20 rule, what you really need to consider is the type of product or service that you're selling, the length of the sales cycle, the commoditization factor, if you will, and all of the other sort of intangibles about the product. How long does the person buy? How long do they keep it for? So when it comes to recruitment and staffing, the answers certainly vary there, but it's very different from most industries. So in our business, is it true? Now think about it. What the 80-20 rule doesn't do is focus on anything other than the now. So if you were to do it and say, Neil, you're wrong. I just looked at my client list and 80% of my perm placements are coming from 20% of my clients. And hey, 80% of my revenues absolutely come. I look at my sales reports and my sales analysis, and Neil, you're mistaken. But no, you are mistaken, if you excuse my French. Because what the 80-20 rule doesn't do is it doesn't look at the future. You just did it. You looked at right now. It doesn't tell you what your client base will look like 3 months from now, 6 months from now, a year from now, 2 years from now. So if you were to actually look at your client base today, what you need to do is go back 3 months, 6 months, and even go back a year, so maybe 2 years. And then look at it, and then give me your answer. That can be a good indication whether the type of business and desk that you're running will fit into the 80-20 rule. Odds are that it won't. For some contract temp business or some large account type business and bigger ticket item, longer sales cycle stuff, it typically works, but you'll need to prove that to yourself. For permanent placement, no, it almost doesn't work. And sometimes you need to go back 2 years or even 3 years, especially if you've only had a few really big clients that have helped make your desk successful. If you're a retail or a boutique or a smaller volume temp shop, the odds are exactly the same thing, that it's not going to work. So you really need to be concerned about what that client base and what that mix is going to look like in 3 months or 6 months or in a year. So I will tell you another big fallacy, which is an obvious one, is people focus on their results. They focus on the profitability or the sales or the margin or the billings that they had for that month or for that quarter or certainly maybe for a year. But it's not an effective way to look at your business. Your client base is everything in our business. And if I can give you just a great tip that I always espouse when being an executive in this industry and helping people either become more successful or turn around problems, was to focus on that client base. If your client base isn't growing, your business is going to halt at some point. So look at your client base, the number of clients that you're servicing every single month at a minimum, and look how you're trending. So I don't care if you had an unbelievable quarter. If your client number is less this quarter than last quarter, or even the same, it wasn't an unbelievable quarter. That was the result of something you did 2 quarters ago, or 3 quarters ago, or a year ago, or frankly, maybe when you first got into the business. All right, so the client base is critical. Look at that growth. Critical for the perm business, and for those of you who might be operating in recessionary times, and you say, my goodness, my desk has fallen off the face of the earth, and more than other people who are more diversified. Well, that's why. So if you look at other factors that can affect this, you need to look at what we call your account penetration. And you all know what it is, but how much are you really using that every single month at a minimum? That's how many perm orders or perm placements, or how many temps or workers do you have on assignment at any given one client. Is it 2? Is it 1? Is it 1.2? Is it 3? Is it 5? Your number's going to vary based upon your business and your mix and your specialty and your setup. But you need to go back now after this video and look at your history. Go back a year and make this a project so you know how you've been trending and what your averages should be and whether you like that average. So penetration is another thing you need to look at every single month at a minimum. Now, there's not necessarily a right or a wrong answer. Your account penetration might be high. Does that mean that it's good? Well, on the one hand, it is pretty good. It means you're certainly getting a lot of business from one place, and that's wonderful. And if it was by design and by breaking into different departments, kudos to you. But if it's because you had a client that just happens to have a lot of needs and you're not focusing on others, or because you have a big temp project in there with 20 people, that's not necessarily good, and you should probably ignore that and look at the rest of your averages. You don't want to put all your eggs in one basket, in other words. People that have too high of a penetration always would scare me because I'd be concerned about the ability to grow in the future. Now, if your account penetration is too low and you see it trending downwards, again, if it's planned, that's a good thing. If you're trying to diversify and with that you see your client base increase, okay, it's good. But if it's too low, it could be telling you some things. Why aren't people giving me more business? Why am I only getting one placement at a client? Why do I only have, on average, one temp, or maybe less or slightly more in any one account? Why is that? So again, you have to look at that in relation to your client base overall. So again, other things you can look at, I refer to it as fill factor. I'll get into that in another video, so make sure that you check it out. But again, the 80-20 rule in our industry, it's really a bunch of nonsense. So you need to study your client base, have your strategy, and go and hit it. So as always, sell like the wind and carpe diem, my friends.